in projects. That means actually we configure library. We configure library to be used by various projects. That means which library your projects have to use, from where they have to access the resources, all such information we define here. Like it includes CSS files, it includes JavaScript files. So CSS files, from where CSS you should take. Suppose you are using Bootstrap. When you are using Bootstrap, generally where those libraries are present, I hope you already know. All libraries are present in which location? Node underscore modules. I hope you know this folder, right? In any web development, all library files are kept in node modules. You download any library, that library file is present in node modules. That is very common in web development. Everybody in web designing, they know that whatever they download from NPM, Node Package Manager, all that library will be in node modules. So that means libraries in node modules, the configuration will be defined inside angular.json. Suppose you downloaded Bootstrap. Bootstrap files are present in node modules. But Bootstrap files need to be used in your project. That configuration you have to give in angular.json. That means files will be in node modules. Their configuration will be in Angular.json. That is what actually these two. So node modules, it is a very common folder. It comprises of library files. So it comprises of library files. All library files are present inside this node modules. You can see here, for example, so you have a node modules. All the library files are present inside these node modules. But in order to use these library files, generally, if you are working with HTML directly, what you do, you link them in HTML file. That means whether it is a JavaScript file or CSS file, you link in directly HTML. But here we configure in Angular.json. As of now, Angular.json is very limited. Nothing is there because we don't have any project yet. And you can see it is taking library from node modules. We haven't created any projects. Once we create project, then for every project, from where CSS it should use, from where JavaScript it should use, all those details configure here. Currently, we don't have any projects, so it is empty. So, but already there is a configuration here, node modules. That means whatever library is there, it is present in node modules. We configure it in Angular.json. And there is another option is git ignore. There is another file you can see, git ignore, .git ignore. .git ignore, actually it is configuration for Git. That means if you are collaborating your project with Git is version control tool, Git is cloud where you can publish your application. So Git provides so many things. Git provides version control mechanism. Git provides shared libraries. You can develop a project among the community of developers by using Git. You can publish by using GitHub pages, right? So Git related all the configurations. If you want to publish your project on Git, then those configuration related details you have to define in git ignore, right? This is not required if you are not using Git. It's not mandatory because it's not mandatory that everybody have to use Git. But if you are using Git and configuration of Git is defined inside this, right? What is Git? Already, I hope you know, it is a versioning tool. Git can be used for publishing the projects, deployment of projects using GitHub pages. So many are there. So Git ignore as of now, it doesn't have any importance until or unless you collaborate your project with the Git communities. Next, you have another file, editor config. Editor config. Editor config is nothing but it defines the rules for editor. It defines the rules for editor. It defines the rules for editor means already I told you every developer can use different editors. And if every developer is using different editor, so in every editor, different rules can be there. But we want all our developers to follow common rules, not only in TypeScript, creating files, keeping the files in a location, repositories, everything must be as per the standards. In that case, every editor have different rules, because actually this file comes from official website is editorconfig.org. This is the official website, editorconfig.org. So you can go here, you can see these are all the editors that developers can use. For Angular, you can use all these editors. We are using Visual Studio Code. Then every editor have different set of rules. In that case, in one project, several people are working on different editors, then they follow different styles and mechanism. We don't want that. We want all developers to follow same rules. Then the rules for editor you define inside. You see, these are all the rules. These are all the rules it is defined. These are all the editor rules. That means from where to pick up the files. So end of line means, do you want to terminate with semicolon or not? Or after the line is finished, enter is compulsory or not? Because sometimes after you finish the line, until or unless you press enter key, it will not recognize as line is finished. And it will show some warnings at the end saying that line is not completed or some such things. Not only that, you see, so indent styles, how much space it has to take. When you press tab key, how many character space it should take. So spaces, and not only that, even you will have these are regular expressions. Regular expressions means what are the wildcards used for searching files. You know wildcards already, question mark, plus, asterisk. You learned about these regular expressions. All these are the rules. That means when developers are using various editors, we don't want to follow them different rules. We want all of them to follow the same rules, because every editor may have a separate rule. In that case, all the editor related rules are defined inside this editor config. Right? So these are very important and required for our project workspace, right? Your workspace is ready, and you see node modules already explained. VS Code is nothing but this VS Code contains. VS Code is not every time. So this is recently added into your projects actually, but it is temporary. Actually, VS Code contains extensions. So VS Code contains launch details. So VS Code contains task. Actually, VS Code is nothing but it is a folder which contains information about which browser to use, what extensions to be used. Extensions means in your project, what extensions you want to use. This is not common. Extensions means already you know, in order to run a project, what you need. In order to run a project, you need support for live server. I hope you know that. I already showed you in the beginning. We install plugin live servers, right? Which translator is required for translating TypeScript into JavaScript. For that we need TSC, right? Which server is required to compile and run all the TypeScript files, we need TS server. I hope you remembered we discussed about TypeScript architecture. TS server will be there, transcompiler will be there, core compiler will be there. All such information is defined inside that. But remember that is related to editor. So this will be changing for every editor. This will be changing for every editor, and this has nothing to do with your project, right? Of course, you can ignore this, or you can use this to configure all the settings for Visual Studio Code that I will show you while deploying. That means when we are deploying, when you are running the projects, we will see how to handle it, right? As of now, you don't need to worry about this because you will not see this as a part of any Angular project. It is just a supporting folder given for your Angular project if it is running on Visual Studio Code. If it is running on any another editor, it will not be there, right? Later, we will see the importance of that. So no need to even discuss about that VS Code as of now, right? It is just not a part of your Angular project, right? Workspace contains only these details. What are those? Node modules and these. So we have ready. All these are the files inside a workspace. Okay, workspace is ready. After workspace is ready, now we have to create a new project in workspace. We have to create a new project in workspace. We have to create a new project in workspace. Let's see how to create a project in workspace. Just what you have to do to create a new project in workspace, open terminal in workspace. You have to open terminal in workspace and type the following command. And the command is ng generate application and your project name, any name for the project. So any application name, app name you can give. So for example, I am giving like ng. We can use shortcut ng app application, right? G for generate, ng generate application and application name. Application name I'm just giving here as suppose shopping. So that is the application name. You can give any name for the application, right? So the workspace is created. Now in that workspace, we are creating a project. And once you create a project, a lot of changes will happen. Several new things will be added into your workspace. Let's see. So as of now, in our workspace, currently we have only one folder called node modules. Now let's create a project here. I will open this terminal. This is the terminal. Already I showed you that you should not use PowerShell. Always use only command prompt. How to change to PowerShell to command prompt, I already discussed. So now here you have to just run the command, that is ng generate application and application name. I will give as shopping. Okay. So we are creating a new project. You can have any number of projects in workspace. Now, when you are creating application, see the first step. In the first step, now you have to go through some questions. In the first step, it is asking, would you like to add Angular routing? Routing is very important for navigation, right? Later we will learn about routing. So routing makes your application as a perfect single page application. Single page application, user will stay on one page, can access everything onto the page. But in the beginning days, we don't use any routing. So we use routing later once we learned how to develop an application, then we will use routing. So I will ignore this, no. Because whenever routing is required, we can add it. we will learn how to manually add it. So we don't want any routing. Whenever I need, I can add it manually. How to add manually is better, right? If you know how to add manually, this is nothing. So we will not add any routing because we don't need routing in the beginning days. And whenever we need it, we will add manually. We will see how to add manually. Because if you select yes, it will add one extra file into your project, some extra library into your project, which you will not use for several days. So no use. So we will say no, I don't want to add routing. Okay. This is the first question. Would you like to add Angular routing? That is the first question. When you generate application, you have to walk through some questions. Would you like to add Angular routing? No. I am selecting no. I don't want to add any routing. Later we will add whenever required. Okay. So I said no. Then okay, fine. Next step. Next step, it is asking which style sheet format you want to use. It is asking which style sheet format you want to use. Which style sheet format you want to use. I hope you people already learned that when you are developing a project, in that project, if you need some styles, so you can use so many style sheet formats. Like what are the style sheet formats? You know, you can use CSS, you can use less, LESS, you can use SAS. You have learned about SAS, less, and CSS. It's not mandatory because if your application is very much involved in a lot of CSS effects, then as a developer, you know that you have to use SAS or less. If limited CSS is there, nothing much CSS, so then you can directly use CSS, right? But in order to use SAS or less, you must learn SAS or less. I hope if you are a web developer, you learned CSS, SAS, less like things. And if you haven't learned, then directly go with only CSS. So if you don't know SAS or less or anything, just you select CSS. You choose CSS, right? This is CSS. CSS is a traditional CSS we are using. Okay, right. I will select that CSS. Now the project will be created here. Now the project is created and it is adding all extra library into this now. Extra library into this. Now it is installing so many new things. Several new options will be there here, right? I will discuss about them. Now, once you said okay, that means you mentioned all these details. So it will add a new folder into workspace by name projects, So your project folder, your project that is shopping, your project shopping is added into projects. It is added into projects. So that means you can find your shopping folder inside that projects, right? Now, once the project is created, you can see the project, it is still creating. Okay. Once it is created, you will find your project in that shopping. So it is downloading, installing a lot of packages, and it is updating. Okay, so packages successfully installed. So now your project is ready. Now let's close this terminal. Now you go to the projects. In the projects, you will see there is a shopping folder. Now in this shopping folder, there will be so many new things. In the shopping folder, you will see several new files are there. That means now what are these files? What is the purpose of these folders and files? Let's see. Actually, when you go to the project, so project folder, project comprises of following file system. Project comprises of following file system. So what you have inside the project? One is, I will give file or folder, and here description. So what you have inside the project? You see the shopping project. In the shopping project, you will have some folders and files. You can see in this, there is a folder called SRC. So it is the folder that contains all project resources. Project related all resources are present here. What project resources? Actually, usually project contains modules, project contains components, project contains templates, project contains so many static files. All these are present inside SRC. What are components, what are modules, I will explain. We will discuss about that. Project related, all the resources are kept inside SRC. They are all kept inside SRC. Project related, all resources are kept in that SRC. Okay. Now let's see. There is another file, browsers list RC. There is another file, browsers list RC. Browsers list RC, it contains information about supported browsers. That means you can add or remove support for any browser. That means which browser is suitable for running this project application. You can decide browser. If you want, you can ignore any specific browser. Then the project cannot run on that browsers. For example, now from the latest versions, so this Internet Explorer is outdated. That means now officially from June 22 onwards, Internet Explorer dead. That means officially Microsoft announced that there is no more Internet Explorer. We are removing it. And in such cases, several browsers which are not supported, they are ignored. That means whether your application should run on that particular browser or not, you can decide. That configuration for browsers we defined inside this location. That means what are the browsers supported? So we have to define the browsers and their versions. So Chrome, Firefox, Edge, Safari, iOS major versions, and Firefox, all these are browsers supported. If you want, you can add or you can remove the browser support. That depends on your requirement, which browser you need to support for this project. That means because web applications already browser compatible, right? That's the reason it's important to mention about the browsers, right? By default, all modern browsers are supported, right? Next, another file, we have a file called karma.config.js. Karma, it is a testing framework used for Angular project, for Angular. It is a testing framework used for Angular. Its configuration is defined in karma.config.js. Its configuration is defined here. That means there are so many testing tools, testing frameworks. JavaScript based projects can use various testing projects. We already discussed that Angular is a developer's platform. Developer's platform means it will provide by default tools which are required from development to testing. For testing, generally we use a framework called Karma, Jasmine Karma. And that is already, it is not a part of Angular. It is a separate framework, but Angular by default gets this framework with every project, so that you can use that framework for testing Angular application. If you want, you can change. You can remove this. You can add another frameworks, XUnit, JUnit, Protractor. So many testing frameworks are there. You can use any of them. By default, Angular comes with a framework, Jasmine Karma. We will learn how testing happens. We will see. But that is at the end, we will see. So testing related, all the configuration is present here. We have Karma config. That means you see, as I told you, it contains Jasmine Karma. That means what is the testing framework, what it have to install, from where it has to run the test. All such testing related options are defined here. In which port number test will run. So in which browser test will run. All such configurations are defined here. This we will not use until we learn testing, right? Test configurations are defined here. And here you can see there is another file, tsconfig.json. We already know it. Already that file is present in our workspace. Then what is again the purpose of this in TypeScript project? Already it is there in workspace. Then again, why it is there in project? Because that is general, everybody can understand. If it is in workspace, that means it is defining rules for all projects. If it is in a project, every project can have separate rules again, right? For every project, you can maintain separate TypeScript rules. It's not mandatory that all projects have to follow the same TypeScript rules. So individual, these are the rules for TypeScript rules for project. So that is for workspace. Workspace maintains the rules for all of, right? And there is another one, tsconfig.spec.json. Wherever you see the file spec is test file. It is used for testing. That means if a file is there and a spec file is there with the same name, that means it is used for testing that file. That means this file contains some code which you have to test from here, right? Those are test files. So testing, all those things you will see later. So these are the important things present inside the project, but still not completed. So you just saw that shopping contains all these files, but project related information is present in which location? SRC. Project related resources are present in SRC. See, now we need to know what is in SRC. This is the biggest one. So next option is, so project resources. Project resources, that means components, file system of SRC folder, the file system of SRC folder. What is in SRC? What it contains? This is another important point. So what is present in SRC? What it comprises of? Let's see. SRC contains lot of things. You see here, when I go to SRC, inside SRC, so many are there. Inside SRC, again, so many files are there. All these you have to know because you have to work with them every day, right? You have to know because every day you have to deal with them. You have to work with them. Now, what are the components inside SRC? Let's see. So here in SRC, you will find the first one, you see app. Actually, app, it is nothing but it comprises of It comprises of application resources, application resources like generally application resources means we call components like services, like pipes. Components, services, pipes, modules, all these are present here. What are those? I will detailedly explain in the next point. We will discuss them. Application related resources are components, services, pipes, modules, all these are present inside this. So that is app. And we have assets. Assets comprises of static resources. Static resources means images. Static resources means images, and it contains text documents, PDF documents, so audio or video files that you are using in your project. All these are present in assets. Assets comprises of all your static resources, right? Next important, you will see here there is another environments. It comprises of configuration for all environments. What are the environments in a project? Generally, every project have 3 environments. We will have development, we will have testing, and we will have production. Development, testing, and production. These are the 3 environments. I hope you already know generally in real-time environment how the projects are built. So what is the hierarchy? In real-time environment, how projects are built? See, actually in real-world project design, in real-world development, entire project development happens in 4 servers actually. Project development happens on 4 servers. We generally have a sandbox server or golden server. We have a development server. We will have a quality server, and we have a production server. In software development in any company, all the development process happens in these 4 servers. That is a common scenario. So sandbox server is nothing but it is the repository server. Repository server means whatever the library that is required for building application, whatever the resources required for building application, everything is kept inside this sandbox server. As a developer, you are given access to development server. That means what developer will do? We build application. Application is built on development server. That means we get the repository from this sandbox and we build application. We build application on the development server. After application is built, we move this application to quality server. From development to quality. Our testing team will be testing that application on quality server. If there are any issues, then they will send back to development. The quality server is the location where the testing happens. And after testing, if it is good, then it is sent to production. Production is live. That means now our clients will be using the application from the production server. Clients will be using the application from production server. If client gets any issue, and very important, if clients want some new features, then we don't make any changes in the production. I hope you know that. We don't make any changes in the production. What we do? We take it to the development. We make the changes in the development, again from development to quality, again quality to production. This is a general scenario. In every real world project development, this is a common scenario. That means, so development, quality, and production. people who are present in development, so we call developers. People present in production, we call them as consultants. We have a Java developer, Java consultant. We have a .NET developer, .NET consultants. Right? What is the purpose? What is the role of a consultant? Consultant means he is involved in supporting production support. Production support is very huge. So that means very high skills are required to work in production support, because lot of technical issues you have to resolve within hours, within minutes, sometimes within seconds. Otherwise, lot of issues will come. That means sometimes people say that I am 10 years experience, I am still developer. That's not satisfied. That means your skills are not great. You are 10 years experienced and still Java developer. That's silly thing. That is because you can't be a developer. That means you need to be more than a developer, consultants. So consultants roles are very high, right? Now I hope you know that generally, so you see, you write JavaScript and CSS. Generally we have a file, suppose bootstrap.css. I hope you know there is bootstrap.min.css. As a developer, you know where to use these two files. And as a developer, you know what is the difference between these two files, right? So that means, what is the difference between these two files? What is the difference between these two files? Bootstrap.css and bootstrap.min.css, these two are CSS only. But bootstrap.css is an uncompressed file. Min.cs is a minified file. Minified is a compressed file. So as a developer, when you are building application, you have to use this file here. You cannot use this file in your production, because this occupies a lot of space. Then what we do is, we use its minified file in production. So why we cannot use minified file in development? Because remember, both functionality same, but both code logic will change. Functionality will be same, the code approach will change. Minified file contains shortcut. That means it is why it is not used in development, because it is a compressed file. It cannot track the error locations correctly. So developer needs to track the error locations correctly. So what he will do? He will use the original CSS file here, and in deployment, he will use the minified file. So both files are required for a developer. We need minified files, we need uncompressed files. Basic people who know little bit HTML, CSS, JavaScript, they know what is minification, right? Because minification is very compulsory and mandatory for real world development, right? You cannot use directly CSS files, JavaScript files in any project in deployment. You have to use only minified files. So how many environments are there for every project development? 3. We will have a development, we will have a quality, and we will have a production. In development, we build application. In quality, we test application. In production, we deploy final, right? Now, while developing, what files to use? While testing, what files to use? While production, what files to use? That is all defined inside this environments. In that environment, that means it contains the configuration for development to production, right? If you don't know how the real world development happens, you can't understand this folder purpose, right? To understand that, you need to know it. As of now, you see, environment contains production false. Why production false? Because currently you are in development stage. Once you finished your development, you can make it ready for production. right? How to configure for production, what to refer for production, what is the development process, this all you will see. How to build, how to debug, how to test, deploy for production, right? You will learn. That configuration present in this file. Okay, I don't need to explain what is favicon.ico. Am I right? What is it? It is the favorite icon, fav icon for project. For your project, every project will have a fav icon, HTML, you know, favorite icons. And index.html, no need to explain what is it. It is the startup page. You know that every project starts with index.html. That is the startup page for your project. Your project will start with index.html. And you can see there is main.ts. What is the meaning of main in any computer programming? What is the meaning of main in any computer programming? In C language, there is a main. In C++, there is a main. What is the purpose of main? Main means, I need technical word. Main means, if I haven't written a main, then what error it will show? If a program is not having main, what error it will show? If a program is not having a main method, what error it will show? It will show an error. What error? It shows an error. Very good. That is entry point. Entry point missing. If there is no main method written, then it says entry point missing. Because main is the entry point. That means it decides from where the application have to start. Main decides from where application have to start. That means from which file it should start. You mentioned index is the startup page, but index is going to use lot of scripts, lot of styles and everything, which is startup. That means from which file we have to start with, from where to start with, from which class, from which module you have to start with. That is defined by using main.ts. It is entry point. In any computer programming, main refers to entry point. It defines, you can see the main.ts. It says that current environment, production environment, and you can see it is showing some error. And you see there is an option called bootstrap module, app module. Remember this, we will come back to this point next level. Next point we will discuss. Bootstrap module is a app module. So what does that means? I will tell you. Actually, for that you need to understand architecture. I will tell you one point here. See, generally what happens is when we are developing an application, a high basic level flow I will explain, because these you will learn again later. A basic flow I will tell you. So we designed a application. We designed an application, and this application have to run on browser. This is, for example, this is browser. Generally, we have to start on browser. We have to start on browser. Now, what happens is, first, this page is requested on browser. Application is requested on browser. So then what happens? First step, page loads. After page loads, the framework loads. The framework loads. That means first page will load, and after that the framework will load. What framework you are using in the page? That means Angular. Angular framework will load. So actually, page loads, when page loads, actually it loads, I hope you know, it is a HTML page. It loads static DOM. I hope you already know that. So every page loads a DOM, document object model, static DOM. Now after that, the framework loads. After framework is loaded, now what framework will do is, Framework will convert this static DOM into dynamic DOM. Framework will convert the static DOM into dynamic DOM. Now the DOM starts interacting with you. That means when it loads, it is a static DOM. Static DOM will not start any interaction. Framework will take control. What framework will do? It will convert the static DOM into dynamic. Once the static DOM is converted into dynamic DOM, now it starts interacting with you. That means on button click, some action, drop down, change some action, all such things are done only when the DOM is converted into dynamic. Actually, in your JavaScript jQuery, to convert the static DOM to dynamic DOM, you have to depend on events. Events like on load, on click, on change, lot of events we have to use. Here framework will take control. Yesterday I showed you, we used a library where you need on key up. And I showed you a framework where we haven't written any on key up or anything. Framework will take control of that and converts the static into dynamic. The process of converting the static DOM into dynamic DOM, this process is called bootstrapping. Bootstrap is different, bootstrapping is different. That means in many interviews of Angular, you get confused with these questions. What is bootstrapping in Angular? Bootstrapping is the process of loading your application and making the application dynamic. That means when application initially loads, it is static. And once framework takes control, it becomes dynamic. Once it is dynamic, then it starts interacting with you. The process of converting the static DOM into dynamic DOM is called bootstrapping. That means now, what is bootstrapping in Angular? Bootstrapping in Angular is the process of converting static DOM into dynamic. Now, very important is in application we have a login. In application we have a register. In application we have an home. In application we have like contact. Now, which module it should bootstrap first? That means from which module we have to start? From which module we have to start? That we have to tell. So I have to start with home. That we have to tell. That means Angular bootstraps. Angular application bootstraps with home. What does that mean? Angular bootstraps with home. That means it will load the home module first and it gets ready from home module. That means what main is doing? Main.ts is telling which module to start with. Which module to start with. Which module to start with. That is entry point. Na? It is telling which module to start with. Currently, in our project, we have only one module called app module. Understood? Every project by default comes with only one module, that is app module. Later, you can add multiple modules, login module, register module, home module. Currently, our project don't have any module. Every project have only one module by default, that is app. And what does this means? Bootstrap app module means start with app module. That means it indicates from where to start with. What is the meaning of bootstrap? This is not CSS bootstrap. Here bootstrap means which module to start with. So main is the entry point. It tells from where to start with. That means it defines entry point. It defines the startup module. It defines the startup module. And by default, what is that process? It say, so bootstrapping. Bootstrapping is the process of converting static DOM into dynamic DOM. The process of converting static DOM into dynamic DOM. So it defines the bootstrapping module, which module to bootstrap, that is done. This is main.ts. main.ts, right? That is the role of main.ts. We can change according to our project. Suppose I want to start with home, or I want to start with register. I want to start with login, your wish, you can change. By default, it have only one. Okay, that is main.ts. Next one, this is very important again, polyfills.js. Remember, almost I can tell that out of 100 Angular interviews you attend, 80 interviews, these questions are common. What is, even at experience level. That means even at experience level, they can ask what is the purpose of main.ts. What is the meaning of bootstrap? What is the purpose of polyfills? It's very common interview question. Polyfills, it is responsible for, it manages differential loading. Differential loading. Can you tell what it is? I already explained. It manages differential loading. What is differential loading? You remembered? I told you it is one of the key feature of Angular. What is differential loading means? Differential loading means, so it will load according to browser. Library will be loaded according to browser. Library will be classified for two types of browsers, legacy browsers and modern. If request is coming from legacy browser, it will load library suitable for legacy. Polyfills will not load a common library. Polyfills will load a library according to the browser. That means differential loading is managed by using polyfills. It is responsible for deciding which library is suitable for the browser, and it loads that library. This makes Angular application compatible across all browsers. That is the main concept, polyfills. And already I explained what is meant by differential loading, right? So browser polyfills. It will import what is the library required for browser, and it will load that is suitable for browser. This is related to browser, right? That is what actually polyfills is. Next important, one more file we have, styles.css. This is nothing but it contains global CSS for project. That means every component we can design CSS. Suppose some CSS we want globally for all components. That means login, register, everywhere some CSS is common. Then that common CSS we will write in style.css. For login module, separate login CSS we can create. For register module, separate register CSS we can create. But for all modules, some common CSS is required. Such CSS is kept inside this styles.css. Okay, that is CSS file. Next important, we have test.ts. This is nothing but test startup file. Test configuration file already there, karma config. This is startup file. Config file will tell which library to use. Startup file will launch the testing. That means from which component to start testing, it will decide. That you will learn in testing, right? As of now, you have to just know that it is a test startup file. It will tell from which module it should start testing. It will define that and it will load it. Later you will learn about this while using testing. So these are all the options present inside SRC. Inside SRC, all these are present. Inside SRC, all these are present. Okay. Now, important is when you designed here, and you can see now, again, there is another hierarchy. Our application resources are present in application resources are in app folder. That means now app folder contains so many other files. Again, this is very lengthy hierarchy. So many complex things are there. app folder contains one more important here. You see now, when you go to app folder, this is app folder now. Assets already I told you it contains images and all. Currently we don't have any of them, empty. It is empty. There is nothing inside that assets. Environments already I showed you. But app, you can see again it contains some files. And in that 4 files, already I told you, by default application contains a component. Application starts with one component. What is that component? App component. What is component you are going to learn now? We are going to discuss. Let's see. Actually, see, let me explain one point here. For example, I hope you learned HTML properly and you know what is DOM and what is shadow DOM. So that means when you learned HTML, you will come across with these two things, DOM and shadow DOMs actually. That's very common thing. For example, see, suppose let's create one HTML file for you just temporarily. I am adding a demo.html anywhere here. So here I am creating doc type HTML head and title. So demo, and here in the body section, I am using input type is equal to date. Just I am using a word input type date. And when I am using this input type date, and let's open this. Now the question is, how come just input type date is giving so much work functionality? That means input type date, how come that input type date is giving so much work, so much functionality? It is giving a text box, it is giving an icon. When I click the icon, calendar is opening. In the calendar, I am selecting date. The date will be stored here. What is this? Just only word data. Just only word date. Right? Actually, what you don't know generally is HTML have lot of components. HTML have lot of components. We call them as actually web components. We call them as web components. Generally, application is built by using components. Application is built by using components. That means actually, generally, this is a text box. This is a text box. Beside the text box, there is a icon. There is an icon. And when I click on this icon, that means this icon have a click event. Understood? On click event. On click event, it will open a pop-up here. In that pop-up, it will load. What it will do? It will load dates into this. And another important, when you select dates, that means on select, it will collect that value and it will store inside this text box. So much work is there. That means what you know here is it is looking like an ordinary box, but behind this lot of design is there. I will show you. You go to inspect. When you go to inspect here, you have generally settings. These are browser settings actually. So you see, I will go to this here. First, go to body section. You see input type date. This is what you know as an ordinary HTML learner. But professional people know that behind this lot of design is there. And what is the design? You can go to settings and select here an option called show shadow DOM. You select that option, show shadow DOM, and now close it. Now you can see that inside this date, lot of design is there. You see, this is all the design for that date. So much work is there. What do you think? Simply date means date picker will come. From where it will come? Some space. Somebody have to design it. And the people who designed it and given to you are the people who are genius in HTML. You are after all the person who are using that library. You haven't built it. Right? So many people say, I learned Java, I learned .NET, I learned PHP. What you learned? You learned how to use library of Java, .NET, PHP. Who built that library? That person is great, not you. After all, using a library, everybody can use. 10th grade also have Java. CBSE 10th class student knows Java. He does project in Java. CBSE 5th grade student knows HTML. He learns HTML. 5th class CBSE have HTML. These are very simple things. That means the logic behind it is complex. That means after all, everybody can use library, right? You are learning Java means it's not great. You are learning .NET means it's not great. The people who built library for you, they are genius. That means you are using a class to communicate with the database. How that class is designed to communicate with the database, that is architecture. That is key point here. That means all these days, you used components, but you never know that those are components. Now you are going to build such components. That is Angular. Angular will teach you how to design such components. Right? Without Angular, JavaScript, jQuery also can teach you how to build components. These are built by using JavaScript, jQuery only. Right? That means Angular is now going to teach you how to build such components. Right? That means what is a component? I hope you know. Component is a combination of markup, logic, and design. A component contains three things. A component contains presentation, a component contains logic, and a component contains styles. That means a component contains logic, a component contains design, and a component contains presentation. That means you see the way of how they kept this. This is left side, this is right side. There is a black border outside. This is styles, CSS. That is CSS. And very important, when I click on it, it opens, that is logic. Some JavaScript is working. I selected it, it is working. And it is present. See, that means lot of work is happening behind. Now Angular will teach you how to design such components. Will teach you such components. Earlier we used to call them as web components, right? Now also you have these web components. Why we discussed this point? Because by default, app folder contains app component. App component is nothing but app component. It is the default component in Angular application. And very important, you should know that Angular application is built by using, what is the building blocks for Angular? Components. Angular application is built by using components. Not only components, so many other things will be there. But the main building blocks are components. That means every Angular application is built with components. And by default, every Angular project comes with one component, that is app component. If you want, you can delete it and you can add your own components. By default, one component is there, that is app component. And as I told you, every component contains three things. What are those? It contains markup, it contains styles, and it contains logic. So markup is present in app.component.html. The logic is present in app.component.ts. And the styles are present in app.component.css. And testing is present in app.component.spec.ts. So every component contains, as I told you already, it contains presentation, it contains effects, it contains logic. Presentation is in HTML, effects are in CSS, and logic is in TS. And its testing is present in that skip file. That is the reason every component comes with 4 files. Component comes with 4 files, and by default we have those 4 files here. You can see in the project. Now in the project, in SRC, in app, you have these 4 files by default. That means you have component CSS, component HTML, component TSS, and spec.ts. These all are related to only one component. These are all related to one component. So the configuration is present here. Now, very important, when you are designing a component, when you are creating a component, this component uses some library. That means it may be using some library. When a component using library, which library to be loaded for that component? Which service must be loaded for the component? So component related libraries and their configurations are defined in app module. That means whatever library required for the components that you are building, that library is configured in app module.ts. That means you designed a component, its supported library will be defined here. So whenever application starts, what this app module will do, it will load that library and make your component functional. Right? If any component is not having the supported library configured in app module, that component cannot work. Every component that is defined in Angular project, that component related configuration is defined in app module. So app module is compulsory. All these 4 files you can delete. If you delete, you have to create your own component. Application cannot start with component. Application must have at least one component. And by default, we have a and app component related configuration is in this app module. App module will import all the library that is required for that component. For app component, whatever library is required, it will import everything. This file I will explain detailedly. In the next level, we will discuss that file detailedly. As of now, this is the infrastructure. So you have all these component files and one more file. What is that? app.module.ts. That means it configures the library required for components, services, etc. Component services, etc. Everything present inside this file. So still everything is ready. All the file system is ready. Now what we have to do, we have to start the project and see how it works. So that means now I hope you got one clarity. When we start the project, actually what is going to happen now is when you start the project, which page will initially load? Index.html. In this index.html, a component will be displayed. What is that component? That component will be app component. That is the concept. That means you will see index page, but index page contains app component. So see now, let's start the project. How we can start the project? So next step, start Angular project. How do we start Angular project? To start Angular project, you have to first open terminal. Okay, and you have to run the following command. So following command, what is that command? ng-serve project is equal to shopping. This is compulsory. Serve, right? ng-serve project shopping. I already told you that we are working in a workspace environment. Here you cannot try the commands that are shown on internet websites. Here commands are different. So what you watch in YouTube channels, they are different. So don't try those commands here. They will not work, right? So here you follow the same what I have given because our environment is completely different. So generally we use the ng-serve for running project, but not here. So here we have to use ng-serve project name, right? Now project will run on http://localhost 4200. That is the default port number, right? Let's start that and see. So let's open here and run the project here. ng-serve project is equal to shopping server and project is equal to shopping. Now it will first build the application. It will verify are there any problems in this. We haven't written anything to have problems. By default, it will have one component. Automatically, it will start with that component. How to create our own components and design application, that is what we are going to learn. Right? First, we will start. Once the application compiled successfully, now you have to launch that application on browser. There are so many commands for running the projects and all. As of now, just follow what I given. Later you will learn all other options also. Okay, it is compiled successfully. Everything is fine. Once it is compiled successfully, it is saying that, so development server is listening on this port number. You just make a request. So open any browser and http://localhost : what is the port number 4200, and it will request and gets this. This is your app. This is the sample application. And this sample application contains lot of design. Right? Now the question is from where all this coming? Actually, from where it is coming? Index. Let's go to index page and see. In that index.html, interestingly, you will see that body contains only one line. That one line, how it is showing so much? That means I can remove this. I can remove this. I can remove this. I can put a heading. So welcome to Angular. In that index, save. After making any changes, save. Then you can see we refresh here. Those same changes are updated. That is starting with index. But how so much information is coming? Actually, that is app component. It is keeping a component in the startup page. That component is app that we haven't designed. Let's create our own components and we keep them in this index. Now we have to learn how this entire cycle works. That means the architecture of Angular application we have to learn. How Angular application runs, right? What is the basic architecture behind it? That we will see. That we will see tomorrow, right? You can try up to this now. Then tomorrow we will see the architecture of Angular application. You will learn how to run the application. Okay, right.